All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast, and happy to welcome back friend of the show, Tom Nichols. He's a staff writer at The Atlantic. Tom Nichols, how you doing?
Good, man. Good to see you again.
Great to see you. Always stuff to talk about. But I want to start broad and just maybe then we can narrow things down. I am curious. Trump has been taking steps which, in my opinion, are destined to stir up trouble, including hurt the economy, like the tariffs and stuff like that, raise prices. Is there a method to the madness? What's his end game?
No, there isn't. I think, part of it is having been returned to office, maybe even against his own expectations. He's just decided to say, I was right about everything and I'm going to do it and I'm going to prove it. Everybody made fun of me about tariffs and I couldn't get my way, so I'm going to do it again. I mean, he has a kind of oppositional defiance disorder, like a small child, that if you say, don't do this, he says, now I'm going to do it twice just to prove that I could do it and that I was right. And I think, he's just fascinated by tariffs, even though, you know this, even the circle around him, except for maybe Peter Navarro or somebody, but most of the people around him really don't believe in any of this, but they don't know how to stop him. So, I think the tariffs are actually the least of our problems. He's also just doubling down on, I don't have to obey courts. I can scratch out parts of the Constitution because I feel like it.
We'll get to that. I'm about to call Airman O'Malley. Sorry, what's the line from A Few Good Men?
I've got Airman O'Malley and Airman Harris back here. We'll get to them.
We're going to get to all that. I mean, but the economy is the one area, though. Like, presumably presumably Trump won the election because of inflation, the cost of eggs, and all that. And so, even though I think the deeper concerns are what you just mentioned, I mean, if prices keep going up, that does not bode well for Trump or Republicans, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I still bristle at the notion that that's why Harris lost. I think the fact that eggs are more expensive now, but nobody's talking about it really. Eggs were $5 a dozen, and it was every day, talking about eggs, and now I was just up at my local market here in Rhode Island. They're almost $9 a dozen, and it's like, okay, that's not really what it was about. I think it was about a lot of things. I think it was about people just wanting to punish the incumbents, as they did globally, for a kind of general itchiness after pandemic and that overhang of higher prices that were inevitable after the pandemic. But I also think, America wasn't going to vote for a black female president. It just wasn't going to happen. I mean, I remember thinking, getting optimistic at moments and saying, well, Trump is so awful at this. The things he's saying are just so openly fascistic and terrifying that, people would vote for a tomato over this guy. And yet I still think I still start to realize that there are just people in this country aren't going to do that. She had a lot of baggage. I think she ran, compared to what she did in 2019, where she was terrible. I think she ran a pretty good campaign, hit the right notes. Trump made all the mistakes we knew he'd make. So I guess part of me is going to argue that, Trump is messing up the economy, but I don't think anybody expected more from him than that. I mean, I think there were some swing voters who were like, oh, the economy is going to be better, even though the economy was great at the moment that the election took place.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, if you could sit down with the Democrats, whoever that is, whoever they are, but just if you could just sit down and give them advice, what would you tell them?
Oh, that's hard. I mean, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not an elected official, so that's, it's hard to put myself in their shoes, because almost anything they do at this point is kind of a bad idea. I totally get, let me go hide behind James Carville, whose answer is just get out of the way and let these guys self-destruct. I know that doesn't play well with the Democratic base and it doesn't enthuse them. And the way Schumer, kind of the like Schumer's decision to pass the CR, it made sense in a bigger political sense, but the kind of the idiom or the kind of the theme music behind it was really the worst, right? It was just like, well, what are you going to do? You know, there was this sort of like, well, we have to let him pass the CR. I mean, yeah, you can make that argument, but then you can say, and in the meantime, we're going to talk about, you know, the following things and hammer away on them. And instead, the news cycle became about Schumer saying, oh, all right, I'll cancel my book tour. That was just, there was just a flat, I think some of the establishment Democrats, maybe the thing, it would be the thing I've been saying for 10 years. These are not normal times.
Yeah.
These are not normal elections. This isn't normal politics. It's not, you can't handle these things, you know, one by one as if they're normal funding or political issues.
I don't think you could expect that the kinds of leaders of yesterday are prepared or the right people to handle the problems of today. Like it just seems to me like Schumer would have been probably great going up against George W. Bush or something, but like this is the game has changed.
Yeah, and part of what's changed is that it's very difficult to go up against people who say, I don't care about the rules of the game. I don't care about the Constitution. I don't care about the good of the country, for that matter. I care about what I want for me and my circle. I mean, this very authoritarian kind of approach of what's good for me and the people who support me is good, and everything else, it takes a back seat. I mean, even when you were negotiating with, I don't know, pick your, who do Democrats hate them? I mean, when you were dealing with Dick Cheney, you know, in the 2000s, or John Sununu, or whoever it was, behind the scenes, you sort of shared this assumption that the rule of law matters, that sooner or later you have to pass a bill somewhere, things have to get done. There is none of that. You know, there is, I mean, first of all, you can't deal with a president whose primary executive agent is an unelected bazillionaire who will threaten to primary everybody in the room with his money. We've never had this kind of a situation. And it's amazing to me that the people who think of themselves as anti-establishment and, you know, defeating the deep state and the oligarchs and the dark Soros and the dark forces and all that stuff are perfectly okay with Elon Musk saying, I will just take out a checkbook and write scads of unaccountable money to anybody in here who pisses me off.
It's amazing. So I'll ask the other question then. If you had a chance to sit down for a half hour with Donald Trump, no cameras, no microphones, like, first, would you do it? And second, what would you say?
Okay, first of all, would I do it? Probably not. What's the point? I don't think Donald Trump is mentally coherent and stable. So I'm not sure that I think it would probably aggravate both of us. He's not a big fan of the Atlantic, by the way. So
very unfair.
Yes. Radical left lunatics. And I think if I were, let's put it this way, if I were trapped next to him on an airplane and he wouldn't stop talking to me, I suppose I would ask him how much of this he's self-aware about. Turn to him and say, you understand this is bonkers, right? That what you're doing is, I mean, you get this, that you don't know what you're doing. And just out of curiosity to see if there's even a flicker of, you know, kind of reflection for a moment. But I could not imagine sitting and saying, okay, I'm gonna ask you these questions, because I think Donald Trump, and I think somebody should. I mean, he's the president. He needs to talk to people. He needs to talk to people, whether they're from New York Times or the Atlantic or Washington Post or whoever it is. But I think years ago there was a great piece, and I'm not going to put a name on it because I'm not sure I'm right about this, but it was a piece that says Donald Trump has defeated the modern political interview, because he just says stuff. Yeah. Like, he doesn't worry about whether it's ever going to be fact checked, doesn't care how it sounds in print, doesn't listen to the question. I've said many times, having known people that have had to brief him, he's unbriefable. He doesn't. You sit down and say, Mr. President, you have to. Here's some stuff that you have to know about, this military command, this, security issue, and he nods, and then he starts talking. One of my favorite stories from his first term was a senior officer who finally put his hand, like they were trying to get him up to speed as the president-elect, and finally, as the new president, and finally this general puts his hand on the guy's arm and he says, Mr. President, this is important.
Mm.
And it stopped him for about 5 minutes, is what I was told.
Mm.
So, if I could sit down with him for half an hour, I guess, sure, yeah, sure, I would do it. I guess I don't know what I would ask because I'm not really, not sure how to pursue that. There are professional reporters who are very good at it, and I think he should talk to them. But he really has, like I said, I think he's defeated the whole notion of an actual interview. I think it's important for him to do interviews on television. That's, I think, I'm a firm believer. You asked me, Matt, would I do it? Yes, if it were on TV, live and unedited. Yes.
Yeah, there've only been a couple people who really didn't Jonathan Swan had a really good interview with him.
Right.
But
Again,
not
live
many.
and unedited, just boom, right there.
So, the story that came out the other day, this Minnesota. Before I get to that, let me ask you about this. This is a Canadian actress, Jasmine Mooney, detained by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement for nearly 2 weeks under reportedly harsh conditions due to visa complications. We've also got stories of people being held in El Salvador, Venezuelans being held in El Salvador who actually are not connected to any gangs. So what do you make of this? Where do we go? Like, if they're rounding up people and they're capturing or deporting people who are actually, maybe they overstayed their visa or something. There's a case of a Trump voter who his wife was she's married to a U.S. citizen,
And he's still happy about his vote.
Is he really?
Yeah, he said, I don't regret my vote. It's really tense, but I mean, I was as you know, I was a Soviet and Russia guy during my academic years, and it reminds me of, like Molotov, right? And guy whose wife gets sent off, and he's like, no, sometimes you got to, break a few eggs. I mean, it really is a little scary to me. And I think some of these cases, like the cases where people are getting stopped and supposedly because they were saying bad things about Trump and they got deported. I think some of this is just performative, but it's what his voters want. I don't think they really care if there are mass roundups, as long as they can see a few things here and there that look like something's getting done. Like, let's stick it to an immigrant doctor who said something bad. But I think that's been part of Trump's approach to governing all along, is look at the shiny things going on over here and don't look at all the other scary stuff we're doing over here.
This really, I mean, so who knows? But there are reports of I've seen now at least two allegations of individuals who were like one guy's like a musician and he had some tattoos, but they're saying they're not gang tattoos. And he's rounded up, but he's not just sent back to Venezuela, because you can't send anyone back to Venezuela. He's sent to El Salvador and some prison where this guy may just disappear. This guy may never see the light of day again, as far as we know. It's horrific.
But we know from the child separation policy fiasco the first time around, which, if people haven't read it, I would refer them to the Pulitzer-winning coverage that my colleague Caitlin Dickinson did in the Atlantic about that whole horrible episode. The point was to have cases like this that would be so scary and appalling that it was a lesson to the others. Don't
self-deportation,
yeah, or right? Non-immigration,
right.
and that's it's not the. I mean, I'm an immigration. I have for my whole life. I've been an immigration hawk because I'm the grandson of immigrants, legal immigrants, and so I when back in the years talking about militarizing the border and I was back in the 2010s. I was all for that. What I'm not for is taking relatively benign human beings and throwing them into dungeons and destroying human lives as a way of saying, and let that be a lesson to the rest of you, because that's not the American way. That's not who we've ever been.
So you think that this is intentionally cruel to send a message, do not come here, and if you're here, you best get out now. Otherwise,
Before we throw you into a right.
You might end up in a concentration camp in God knows what country.
Right.
It's not going to be your home country.
Right.
Wow.
I think that there's an element of that because again, we know that we know from what happened in the first time around that was a conscious part of the family separation policy.
Wow. Okay. Minnesota State Senator Justin Eichhorn, a Republican, was arrested for soliciting a minor for prostitution just hours after co-sponsoring a bill mocking, quote, Trump derangement syndrome. Are they going to try to, is it pathologize? I'm not sure the word. Are they going to try to say that if you are critical of Donald Trump, then you obviously must be committed because you are mentally ill?
Well, after that whole incident, probably no. Because I think there's a superseding.
Talk about instant karma. I've heard of karma, but that's quick.
Yeah,
that's almost as quick.
We should also point out innocent until proven guilty.
Fair point. Allegedly. Did I say alleged? Always say alleged.
No, it's always make sure to
He was arrested. I guess that's a fact. Yeah.
The next day, and by an undercover. My understanding was an undercover police officer. There is a lot of projection in MAGA world. I mean, it seems like what's the expression that every accusation is a confession. But there seems to be this kind of externalizing, this kind of projection onto other people that you are these moral perverts and decrepit, human beings, and yet there sure seems to be more than enough of it. I mean, look, there's enough of it in the human race, but I was wondering if you were going to raise that, but I just think it was, like you say, instant karma. But, you're mentally ill for opposing Donald Trump. Well, there are other pathologies at work here as well, but.
Well, it does feel like there are a lot of, there's like a lot of weird people in every political movement. I have no doubt about that. But I feel like the Trump MAGA movement definitely has their share of weird stuff going on.
Well, there's an awful lot of fascination. Back in the first run up, Rick Wilson used to talk about the kind of fascination with sex and homosexuality and creepy memes and all of that stuff, and it always did seem a little on the kind of, again, the kind of heavy projection side. But I'm not comfortable generalizing that to everybody in that world.
Well, there's the was it Jerry Falwell Jr. had some weird stuff. There was
you're doing all the greatest hits from the right wing.
Who's the guy that runs CPAC?
Matt
Schlapp. So there's, there's some stuff going on.
I'm old enough to remember Jimmy Swaggart, man. It's
well, what about Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Donald Trump?
Avatars of moral. It does seem that the harder you preach moral rectitude, then it becomes it's almost like you're really hitting that gong pretty loudly. Is there something you want to tell us here?
If you're for family values, I'm down with that, but I'm a little worried about the guy who's too focused on the gays. You know what I mean? Too concerned about it.
Well, or on family values. And let's not forget that, Donald Trump is a serial adulterer, 3 times married, multiple children from 3 moms kind of guy.
And Stormy
And
Daniels.
Stormy Daniels and the whole thing. I mean, I think it does, rather than sort of just gloat about the misfortunes of a lot of, or the misbehavior of a lot of these people, it does tell you how far the whole conservative movement has fallen, that things that would have been, complete career killers. I mean, today I was arguing with some younger folks on the left, and they kept bringing up Newt Gingrich. And I'm like, a little bit of nostalgia for the days when a speaker could get kicked out of his job for having an affair.
Yeah.
Like that seems quaint to me now.
And then there's the allegations of the threesome. Remember that? That's where he went after John King and went.
Why do you do this to me, Matt? I
went
don't
up in the polls.
Huh?
That was a great moment where Newt is like turns the tables on John. I think it was John King from CNN in a debate, and the fact that you would bring this up in a debate, and like he totally had the audience on his side. It was pretty amazing.
And I think again, the notion that this would even be controversial now, almost kind of warms me with nostalgia, because go back to the Clinton impeachment. Again, if you're old enough and you remember that Clinton impeachment, man who lies to his wife, gonna lie to the country. Moral turpitude. Can't trust a man, who's done these terrible things. And I'm like, those were all Republicans saying that. Those days are long over. Now it is, and in a sense, here, let me be somewhat bipartisan, but also controversial. In a way, the Democrats and the Republicans have flipped scripts, because in Clinton's day, the answer was, look, I know he's a cad and a run around, and I don't know what other a rape, but I get the things out of him that I want.
Yeah,
that's the same argument now that Republicans use, and that Republicans once thought was a deeply immoral argument. That is everything that Republicans roasted Democrats for saying about Clinton.
Yeah.
They've adopted that position wholesale.
Both sides are hypocrites. I feel
one
like
side a little bigger than the other these days, though, Matt.
Well, no, but Democrats were hypocrites back then, and the Democrats have become more the square party. Republicans, I think this is why young people and sort of revolutionary radical people, more Hollywood people, are now embracing the Republican Party. Now that the Republican Party's given up its moral values, it actually has really been good politics,
Yeah, as long as it's now just transactional and about money and punishing other people that you don't like.
The Kid Rock vote. The Kid Rock vote was probably, I think Kid Rock probably did support Mitt Romney, so that maybe that's a bad example, but there's a much more entertainment excitement toward Donald Trump than existed for most.
I've been arguing for years that a big foundation of the Trump vote is that Americans can take anything except being bored.
I was having to explain to my 14-year-old son that the Republican Party during most of my life was considered, like, if you were a young Republican, that was like the dorkiest, nerdiest possible thing you could be. And like when I was even in college, you would not have gotten any girls by being talking about being a college Republican or a young Republican. It would have been like keep that quiet. And now it's like maybe a cool move to be
You're
Trump.
right. I remember being in college in the 80s, and I was not I was not a poster boy for the moral majority. I went to a big school, and let's not open that can of worms. Let's just say
PJ O'Rourke calls a Republican Party reptile.
You're a Republican? How can that be? Because you have fun and you party and you do things, and it was like, the Republicans, the young Republicans in my day, were kids who walked around campus with briefcases and blue blazers, and that it was like on their way to model Congress and all that stuff. But the parties have. You're right. The Democrats are kind of the party of squares, which is I think, not a bad thing. Like a party of, a certain degree of propriety. But on the other hand, there's also, the Democrats have their own kind of fringe, excessive fringe, but that they don't actually run the party. The Republicans have completely collapsed, I think, because they have somebody who says, look, if you just overlook everything I am, I'll do the dirty work for you that you want done. I will go and torment people you don't like, and I'll get more money. I'll take money from them and I'll give it to you. And that there was a long time where Republicans wouldn't take that deal. They wouldn't even take it. And I don't want to throw a new example in here, but they wouldn't even take it with Ross Perot, who was kind of a flake and had a clear animus toward the Bushes, and I'm trying to ruin my daughter's wedding and all this weird stuff, and all that stuff. And I think even there, they said, no, they want grown-ups that wear ties to work, and that's gone. That's all. That's long gone.
All right, I can't have you and not talk a little foreign policy, a little Russia specifically. What'd you make of it? So Donald Trump apparently was left waiting for an hour to talk to Putin. They came up to some moderate deal, I guess, without Ukraine actually being in the room at the time.
We're on the phone. No deal at all. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I don't have much of a question other than, what do you make of that?
What's up with that?
What's up with that?
Putin, what's up with that?
How do you feel?
Leaving him waiting, and it wasn't just that he left him waiting. Putin left him waiting and then mentioned it in public while he left him waiting, like specifically to say, I'm the alpha in this relationship. I'm the big dog, and Donald Trump can cool his heels and wait because they were talking. He was talking to a Russian interviewer, and the guy's like, "Oh, I understand. You got to go talk to, President Trump." And Putin's like, President Trump, whatever. I'll get to him, And it was really, and so I'm frankly, if this were a competent White House, you asked me if I were in the room, I would have said, Mr. President, you need to hang up the phone right now.
Yep.
We're going to reschedule this call. So when Putin gets to his office, his guys have to go, not here.
I can't imagine Trump allowing anyone else to do that to him. He would never put up with that.
Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, anybody. He would never allow an American to do it to him. Let's put it that way.
But look at how they jumped on Zelensky, about saying thank you and all that.
Wearing a tie.
Yeah. I put on a costume after this war is over.
Wait, I have to interject.
I know that it was a translation.
The translation, right? It was not.
I like costume better.
Yeah, but the better part of that quote was, "I'll wear a suit when this is over. Maybe one better than yours." That was the nice little zinger at the end of it. But the deal that was reached wasn't a deal. It was like the only thing that the Ukrainians are really hurting the Russians with are infrastructure strikes. And Putin was like, let's both stop doing the thing that hurts me, and I will continue killing your civilians.
And then Putin didn't even stop, right?
And then Putin didn't even stop. So he's
not
interested.
I think you and I are both concerned about the dismantling of the U.S.-led post-World War II consensus and alliances. It's a small little thing, but I'm sure we're very, you and I are both very concerned. And I know one part of this strategy is soft power involved, like Voice of America, Radio Europe. Talk, if you would, about how Trump this is just one of a million little pieces, but what's up there?
Well, I did a piece about dismantling VOA and trying to kill off RFE and Radio Liberty. And, those of you who follow me on social media know my name is on social media is Radio Free Tom, partly because all the good names were taken, but I did some work for Radio Liberty back during the Cold War. And he's, as I said in the piece, he's pulling a thorn out of the paw of the people he wants to suck up to, the world's dictators, the people that he feels are his natural allies. The amount of money involved with USAGM, the Agency for Global Media, we're talking like couch change by the standards of the U.S. budget. This was not, and I think it's important for people to understand this. This was not some like reckless bunch of teenagers from Doge just like stumbling through the building like they're doing everywhere else. This was Donald Trump signing an executive order specifically aimed at US AGM after, by the way, after he had promised that job to Kari Lake. So as I said in the article,
good news is I'm giving you a job. The bad news is we're shutting down the department.
So,
he's doing that with the Department of Education as well.
Maybe the one bright spot is that it put Kari Lake out of a job. But I think, he did this because we're on the, I said the other day, it's not just that we're on the wrong side with the bad guys. We're becoming the wrong side.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's why he did it.
All right. So tell me, before I get you out of here, a couple last questions. So on a scale from 1 to 10, I need to know how much to freak out. A scale of 1 to 10, 1 being some good stuff's going to come out of it. It's going to be like the first term. Maybe a 5 would be Trump is really creating chaos and he's undermining a lot of important programs, but we'll survive. And a 10 being Trump is setting up a dictatorship, an authoritarian regime. He will not leave in 2028. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being best case scenario, 10. How concerned are you right now?
I'm up around 8 or 9.
Okay. What number do you have to be before you leave the country?
There is no number that makes me leave the country of my birth. Just can't do it. I mean, I can't, I get asked this and I keep, you had a great movie line earlier. So mine is when in 3 Days of the Condor, when Max von Sydow tells Robert Redford to leave the country, and Redford says, I was born in the United States. I miss it when I'm gone too long. And Sydow looks and shakes his head and says, a pity. But I mean, I'm not going anywhere. God willing, I'm, almost 65 years old. I'm not going anywhere. But
how'd you like a trip to El Salvador, Tom?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have to pay for the ticket, apparently. But yeah, I'm up around an 8 or a 9. I mean, I think we're as you and I are speaking right now, Trump is defying court orders, and he is in a conflict with the entire American judicial branch, and basically saying he's going to test that Supreme Court theory that he is basically unaccountable and can do anything he wants. And if that happens, then we are long past this could be bad or we're heading toward a crisis. At that point, he can just order things by fiat. And I think the fact that he has put 4 of the most cronyist appointees in charge of 4 of the most important organizations, Justice, FBI, Defense, National Intelligence, is really worrisome, because if you are going to turn a democracy into an authoritarian state, those are the 4 you need. You don't really care. Yeah, I get it. The ag secretary talking about putting chickens in your backyard is pretty dumb and, fine. The ag secretary is not going to lead a coup against, the rest of the government. But if you decide that courts don't apply to you and laws don't apply to you, and the Constitution is just a suggestion and you can scratch it out with your Sharpie, then you need the lawyers, the spies, the cops, and the army. And he's got all 4 of them in the hands of people of 4 of the worst. Only Matt Gaetz could have been a worse addition to this, but he's got them in the hands of 4 of the worst nominees I think this country's ever seen.
Is there a case coming down the pike that you think will be the test as to whether he will try to say to John Roberts, now go enforce this law?
I think we probably already had it with the Boasberg, turn the planes around, and they went, static, didn't hear you.
But there's plausible deniability there, because there
is some deniability. What is the case?
International waters.
Yeah, good. point taken. There is almost certainly going to be a case, I think, sooner rather than later, where the court says you must do this, and the White House just says, "Thank you for the suggestion."
Last question. In light of what you just said, what daily habits or routines do you follow to help you stay sane and stay sharp?
The most important. I don't know where you're located right now. I live in New England, and just kind of getting out of the house and being here in southern New England is such a healthy thing. I think I was just in DC last weekend, and there is this kind of constant hum of static electricity in the air in a place. I think if I were still living in Washington, where I haven't lived since I was in my early 30s, it'd be almost, because you can't get away from it, right? I mean, no matter where you go in anywhere in DC, you're in DC. The other thing, is I have a cat. And people are I'm sure getting tired of it, but I have a new kitty that I've had for less than a year. So I keep putting pictures of her on the internet. In terms of, daily routine, prayer, family, cat, walk around the neighborhood, and lots of video games.
Oh, you're a gamer.
Oh yeah, man. You didn't know this about me?
I didn't know that.
Known each other, man.
I didn't know. Are you playing like old school, like Atari NES? Are you doing active,
If I can't really show you my, but it's sitting over here. I have this big glittering lit up gaming rig that I just bought a few months ago. No, I'm a total full on gaming nerd. Have been.
What games are you playing?
I'm about to try out. My friends have been telling me to try out Indiana Jones, that new Indiana Jones on the Circle of Time. So I haven't downloaded that yet. I just finished a playthrough because I was testing out my new graphics card. I have, for those of you that care, I'm not in the 5000 series yet. It's an NVIDIA 4090, big bulky card. So I did another playthrough of Fallout 4. I like RPGs. I like simulations. I like military simulations.
RPG, role-playing gaming? What does that mean?
Yeah, role-playing games.
Rocket-propelled grenades? What are we talking?
No. I especially like open-world games where you just sort of get plopped into an area and then you have to go find stuff and figure things out. I've been a gamer since trying to think. I mean, I bought my first computer. This is how old I am, children. My first computer with a monochrome monitor and 10 megabytes of space in it. Wow. Like people's keychains have more space than that now. Was probably in the late 80s. And even then I was playing text-based games. I will say that I do it because if you're working all the time and you're constantly writing and, just trying to think things through, it's a great way to it's a great way to force your brain to focus on something else completely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're like immersed in it. You can't be also, yeah.
And you like if you're friend of mine said, how can you do so much writing if you play games? And my answer was, I can do a lot of writing because I play games. It's the same with, I go to the casinos now and then. I'm a recreational gambler. I like blackjack, craps. It's the same thing. If you're sitting at a blackjack table, you really can't think about anything else. You have to just sit there and keep doing a little bit of math and watching what drops. And it forces you to kind of turn your brain off for a bit so that you can go back to whatever else you're doing refreshed. So I all of the kind of hobbies I have are things that force me to kind of not think about other things and just focus on playing the game.
All right. I need to do more of that. I need to find my thing that's going to do that for me.
It's stupid. I mean, it's like people look at this, you're 64 and you play games, and I'm like, yeah, but it keeps your brain healthy, and solving puzzles keeps your brain flexible. So
awesome, man. Tom Nichols, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming back on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Good to see you.